Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. I am so excited for this next series of episodes. I will be interviewing Recovery Mom, as she's known on social media. I have a special connection with Recovery Mom. When I was at my sickest, I had a different social media account, and one day this woman popped up. I was immediately drawn to her. I fully believed that this was the universe trying to get my attention. I would watch her videos on loop all day long. She was around my age, she was fully recovered, and she had all the answers. From then on, she became my Yoda. There is no question you can ask her that she does not only have the medical answer to, but the mental health answer as well. She breaks everything down so eloquently with her sweet demeanor. She gives you your medicine with a spoonful of sugar. Recovery Mom is here to give back to the eating disorder community. She is the big sister you need. She has a heart of gold, and I'm privileged to call her my friend. Without any further ado, please welcome Recovery Mom. Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. I am so excited for my special guest today. She is known on all social media as Recovery Mom. She is my Yoda. I love her. She made a huge difference in my recovery. I will go to my grave saying she is the reason why I'm still here. So I'm I might be a little emotional. So with no further ado, Recovery Mom, would you like to introduce yourself and give me and the audience all your social media?
Sure. So I'm Recovery Mom, and I feel like that introduction is a little like bigger than I feel because I'm just a human who recovered. And as a human who recovered, I was sitting in my car one day and my teenager pulled out her phone and said, "We're making a TikTok," and asked me a question about my recovery. Um, Uploaded it, and I think 100,000 people watched that video. It was still my top TikTok, was that like very one of those very first one or two, and I was just blown away. And it really made me realize that there was a hole in the recovery community, a hole for people who recovered, for people who are almost recovered, for moms, for adults, for people who weren't teens. Like there was just a big hole. And from there, my kids and I just started creating TikToks and content and YouTube. And my TikTok is Recovery Mom, my YouTube is Recovery Mom, my Instagram is Recovery Mom. I don't know the underscores and the dots and all of that. So you could sparse that out. I really don't know what all that is. It's all on my link tree somewhere. Um, but I'm just a human who thinks about something and sits in my car and makes a TikTok, or would sit with my kids and talk about diet culture. Just common things, always including food, always including drinks, always just trying to normalize what that looks like.
Yeah. So, like I said, you've been everyone's recovery mom, like everyone's big sister. Like you have all all the knowledge, but let's go back in time just a little bit. How did you get into this eating disorder hell?
So I guess for me personally, I grew up in diet culture, as most of us. So I grew up in a family that didn't talk about what you were worth inside, but they talked about what you looked like outside. So you were good if you were skinny, you were bad if you were fat. Every conversation was about which sister was bigger, which sister was smaller, which cousin gained weight, which lost. And it all meant good or bad. So weight always meant good or bad. There was not a female in my family, my entire childhood, that was not dieting. I did not know one. There was some eating disorders in my family, I know that for sure. And everybody was trying to lose weight, dieting, feeling bad when they didn't. And so it was just part of my life. By the time I was a teenager, I was being super careful with what I ate. I was feeling shame and guilt when I ate something I shouldn't. By the time I was in my 20s, I was trying juice cleanses and fasts and trying not to eat for, 10 days at a time. And I can remember going on a 10-day juice fast, and I had my boyfriend in the car in college, and he got a Taco Bell burrito and I kicked him out of the car. I was like, I can't take it, get out of the, I didn't eat though. I was like, and I felt this power of like, I'm not going to eat that burrito. But yet the feelings were so big, I kicked him out of the car and was like, you're not going to eat it around me. And so it was just always ingrained. As far as the tipping point of when I feel like the diagnosable eating disorder happened, like my memory is just really foggy around that because I I can remember after getting married and having kids, starting purging and throwing out my food. And then after I had kids, and I remember clearly doing that between my two kids, after one was born and before the other, and during my pregnancy. And I remember blaming it on morning sickness and throwing up and then telling people it was because I had morning sickness, knowing full well I just didn't want those calories in me. And my youngest had a lot of medical conditions, and I had so much guilt and shame around thinking that I caused it from having that behavior. And after that child was born and had all those illnesses and colic, I blocked out the purging and I started restricting. And that's when I really learned about calories, stopped eating everything but vegetables, and I completely quit purging. And I started in therapy for trauma. And I remember after working on some trauma, um, throwing up, purging, and I had completely forgot that I had purged earlier in my life. I didn't think I had bulimia. I didn't think I had an eating disorder. I forgot that I even had that behavior. And so I remember going to my therapist and saying, I threw up this weekend. Like I on purpose threw up my food. And it was like an old friend came back and enveloped me. It was like all of a sudden everything was okay in the world because I threw up. And all these memories came back that, wait, I've done this before. This is an old friend. This is going to make me feel better. This is going to make my anxiety go away, the stress go away. And my poor therapist, who wasn't eating disorder trained, she was trained in trauma. I think she panicked and she was like, oh my God, do you have an eating disorder? And I was like, I don't know. Do I have an eating disorder? Like, I don't know. Because in my family, anything you do to lose weight was accepted. It wasn't disordered. It was what everybody's supposed to do. And so that was just the rabbit hole of purging and restricting, and then the cycle just went, and my kids were growing, and then they were teenagers, and I lost enough to where I remember my oldest putting her arms around me and saying, Mom, there's nothing left. There is nothing left of you. There's nothing here. And it just kind of hit me like, you're right, there is nothing here. And I knew that, but I couldn't stop it. I could not stop the behaviors. And I remember thinking, this is primal. This is in me. This isn't just me wanting to diet and be skinny anymore. Because if that were it, I could change for my kids. If it was just about me wanting to be skinny, I could change for my kids because I knew that they could get this. I knew it at that point. They were teenagers. And that's when I really realized I had anorexia, was when they were teenagers, when they were old enough to say, Mom, why can't you just eat the burger? Mom, why can't you just gain the weight for me? Mom, why, when they were old enough to verbalize it, when my oldest called me Skeletor in an angry fit of, what teens do. I remember just thinking I had no defense. And then finally, my oldest looked at me one day in the car and said, do you have an eating disorder? Do you have anorexia? And I couldn't say the words. All I could say was, yes, I have a diagnosable condition about food. Like, that's all I could say. I just couldn't say the words to them. But that was the first time I admitted it. The first time I was able to say yes. So when did it switch, from diet culture to an eating disorder? Like, I don't know. Was it 10 when I couldn't, eat the chips like everyone else? Was it 18 when I was on a 10-day juice fast and feeling powerful, right? Was it when I started purging? Was it when I started chewing and spitting? Like, I don't know for some people if you can choose that defining moment, of when it started. I do know it's caused by weight loss, right? Like, we know these things now, but was it the weight loss when I was 10? Was it the weight loss when puberty wanted me to gain and I didn't allow my body to gain? That's energy deficit. Even if I didn't lose, I was preventing myself from gaining, right? So do I know the exact moment? No.
So I relate to all this growing up in the 80s, Gen X, right? My mom was always on a diet. I remember going to Weight Watchers with my mom when I was, I don't know, 8, 9.
Oh, yeah.
And like, okay. But I think this is like everyone's story, and no one really, when you grow up with it, it's just normal. Like, I've never met anybody who hasn't like tried to manipulate their body in some way. And especially from like, yeah, a young age. And I have a sister, I got compared all the time, right? That's
Mm.
hard. So how did so when all this was going on with your eating disorder, and you talk about you have teenage girls, were you like, oh my God, like, am
Oh,
I sending
shit.
them to therapy? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Which I did. I mean, I did. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the one reason, the only reason I recovered. If I didn't have kids, I would still be sick. Absolutely. Because I knew at that point, I did a lot of research when I really started recovery and said the words, I have an eating disorder. I knew at that point, everyone knew. Now everyone's watching. Now I have to do it. Right now I have to get better. I can't just say I'm dieting. I can't just air fry a carrot, put it in a romaine leaf, and call it a hot dog and tell everybody I'm being healthy, because now they know, right? Now those behaviors are going to be seen different. And having the kids, females, and eating disorders are, estrogen mediated. They are more prevalent in female genetics, in female hormones. I knew that the chances were big that they would get one. I knew it. And knowing that, I knew I had to recover. And having them watching, I just thought, if I can do this, I'll give them a path to do it themselves. And I just kept trying to tell myself, like, there, yes, I could be the skinny grandma, or I could be the bigger grandma. And of course, then I was using words like fat, right? Disparaging words that meant something inward to myself. Those words meant something different then than they do now. And I thought, but I have to. Those are my only two choices. And I knew that they had a chance to get this, and I knew the chances were big, absolutely. And I knew they were watching my every move. And I had one of each. I had one kid that was silent, that would never say anything about what I ate, that would never comment on my size, that was just watching, right? Just, but also my best friend, like just always sweetly there, always in my arms, always wanted to lay in the bed with me, would have slept in my bed until they were 18. And then I have the other one who was calling me Skeletor, who was telling me, why can't I just eat this? Who was telling me there's nothing left in my body, who was like vocal, 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 who was telling other people in my family they need to tell me to eat more. Like, so I kind of had like one of each on my shoulder, one of each kind of, I don't know what you would call it, like not a therapy guide, but just like one that was just so calming and I could go to. And that's the quiet one, is the one that I went to when I was trying to learn to eat in restaurants because I knew they would just sit there quietly. But then the loud one I needed for different things, like when I needed to verbalize something or when I needed to, when somebody commented something and triggered me, it was the loud one that I would go to and say, this person said this, because I knew they would rail back at me and say all the right things. So it was just like so wonderful to have those two humans who were old enough at this point. They were probably, late teens, like 18, 17, to go to and to be honest and open with. I couldn't have done that if they were younger, absolutely. But by that time, when I was really deep in recovery, they were old enough to have those conversations with.
So when you said you were open and you exposed yourself to everybody, but everyone already knew, but you said the words and took your power back, who did you tell? Like, was it just like your immediate family, like your kids, or like did your parents know? Did your work know? If you're comfortable
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, there's like stepping stones to that, I think, for everybody, right? So first was that moment in the car when I said, yes, I have a problem with food. That was with my kid, right? The loud one, Lou. And then, from there I was able to kind of say it. I think my kids were even before my husband, to them. And then, my husband, of course, he knew I would go downstairs and throw up, right? He's no fool. But I thought he didn't know. Later, he told me he knew. But I honestly thought I was so quiet. We think we're so sly. But then it was my husband, right? And then I told him. And then months went by of just me trying to recover. And meanwhile, I'm trying to recover. And my parents don't know. So they're still buying me things like on Easter, they'll give me a bunch of 100-calorie pack foods because I had this phase where I would not eat all day and then eat like 500-calorie packs at night. It was just like a thing. And we all have our things when we're sick. And so my mom would buy me those, and my kids and husband would look at me knowingly like, oh man, that's awful. And so it was just a stepping stone because my parents, coming from that era, it was harder to tell. And it took probably almost a year maybe into recovery before I literally said the words. And it was, I think, even after I met Shan and I downloaded a bunch of the research and I took that genetic research and I shared it with my parents, and I said, look, this is what this is what it comes from, this is what I have. And my mom said, it's not the throwing up kind, right? Because one's a good eating disorder because it means you're strong, powerful, and you're above everybody, right? And then the throwing up kind of eating disorder, it's lower, it's worse. It means you're a lower human on the eating disorder scale. So I just didn't even respond to that. And at that time I had so much shame. I couldn't even say, yes, I do that. I lied and was like, no, it's not the throwing up kind, still giving into that like shame that your parents can give you anytime they speak, honestly. And then my dad, he just said, well, now that you know, you can just eat, right? Like now that now that we diagnosed, you can just eat and it's all going to go away. And then from there, it was still, they don't really talk about it still, not often. I got to a point where I talk about it a lot more openly. I kind of force them now, kind of out of their comfort zone. And then from there is the workplace, because I got to a place at work that I had looked so sickly, so like I knew people were talking and I knew they were saying things. And one year, because I work at a school, an elementary school, and so you have the summers, you don't see people for a month and a half, and then you come back for trainings, and we went back for trainings, and we're kind of walking through the school because we got a new school built. taking a tour. And after going in one of the rooms, one of my coworkers pulls me aside. He says, Melissa, come here. And I go over there. She says, hey, are you okay? I just want to know, like, is something wrong? Are you sick? Should I know something? And first of all, I don't know. People that work in schools, they're like sewing circles. They are gossipy creatures. She wasn't asking because she really cared. She was asking so she could share this information with everybody. But I lied. I have a medical condition called myasthenia gravis, and I put a lot of my eating disorder off on that. I was just like, oh, I can't eat. I have a problem swallowing. I have problems because of that. And so I lied and I didn't tell her the truth, which I'm sure they all knew anyway. And it took another 6 months to a year after that until I finally just would say it. I just started saying it in the break room. If somebody said, I can't eat that, or the pizza has too many calories, I would just be like, I have an eating disorder and that makes me uncomfortable. I would say it. One time somebody was heating up coffee with a half of like a super low calorie protein drink as their lunch. And I said, that is so triggering. That was like, that takes me back. I had an eating disorder and I'm like recovered now. And you know what she said? She said, oh my gosh, I'm recovering from bulimia. And she opened up to me. So like having those conversations open wherever you are is just, it's freeing when you get to that point. It's scary, it's terrifying, but also it's freeing. And I went back to that lady that told me that, asked me if I look sick, like 6 months, probably a year later. And I said, I just want to tell you, when you asked me that, it was very triggering, right? It's triggering to ask somebody about their body, about their health, about their weight, if they're not ready to openly share with you. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And I said, but also, that's okay because you're allowed to be you. That's who you are. You're loud, you're boisterous, you're out there, you ask people shit. Like, you're allowed to be you. And if I'm triggered, I have to manage that myself. But I just want to tell you that A, that triggered me. B, I worked on that. C, I'm recovered now. And I want to let you know that I wasn't sick with that. I had an eating disorder and I'm good now. But I just wanted to clarify that conversation. And so I went back and kind of made amends for that lie. And then I was just like, I wear my eating disorder shirts at work. I wear like this. People know, they know about my contents. I don't know if some of them have come to me and said, I have an issue. My brother has an eating disorder. My mother is, and it's really nice to be able to have those open conversations with humans and even acquaintances because we don't have that in the world right now. It's just shameful for everybody to speak about, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
Man, I could
and
talk a lot.
no, that's good. That's good. Talk away. Uh yeah, just exactly what you said, to take your power back, to talk about it. That God, like I know it's scary, right? But at the same time, I remember when I was sick, like sick, and I live in a small town, and the rumor about me was I was on drugs. And people know my kids, right? My kids big in a community thing. My kids play sports. And I was like, oh no, right? And not ragging on anyone who has addiction, not because clearly I have an addiction, just not that one. And I thought, oh shit, what the hell am I going to do now? Right? Like, short of saying I have cancer, right? Which is like totally like not going to go well, right? What the hell do I do? Like, and you're just thrown in a situation where you gotta, I
Yeah,
don't know,
lie or
man
tell the
up.
truth, Yeah, it's like you were talking about your dentist the other day on one of your TikToks, and I it reminded me of I remember the first time I was honest with my dentist, and I was so terrified when I made the appointment. I said, I'd like to talk to the dentist alone, please, in a private room first. I was so terrified. Like, I didn't want somebody to be in the next chair over, right? And we got in that private room, and I said, I just have to let you know that I have bulimia, and it's been really bad the last year or two. And I'm just terrified for my teeth, but I need to be honest and open and let you know and make a plan for how we're going to take care of this. And honestly, Heather, she said, I had bulimia all through college. I get it. I was floored. Like the people that open up when you open up. And I thought, my dentist, this woman who I look up to, who is this wonderful professional in the world, who I would just think was this, human being without a problem, just opened up to me that she also suffered. And it just brought this level of comfort and this level of I'm doing the right thing by telling humans.
Yeah, and I'm glad since you brought up the dentist. The one thing that I think people need to know with an eating disorder, your dentist is going to be the first one to peg it. And if you are not honest with your dentist, they're going to think there's a whole lot of other things wrong with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can come forward to someone, please be please be your dentist,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
yeah. And it
it's
doesn't matter if you have anorexia, bulimia, if you're chewing and spitting, if you're just restricting, any of those things, any of those
yeah,
things.
I've been fortunate with my teeth, thank God, right? Because she's made comments about for what you've done to yourself, your teeth are pretty damn good. I'm like, oh, thank God, right? Because I paid all this money for my teeth. I'm gonna lose
Mm-hmm.
them. But how brave of your dentist, though, too, at the same time to open up to you, because we do put these people on pedestals. We forget that teachers, doctors, whoever in a high position job are people and they have
Yeah.
lives.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
And they go
that's
home and they do
amazing.
all those same things. And yeah, you just don't know.
Holy cow. Well, I really appreciate you being open and honest with me today. Can you give everyone your social media one more time?
Recovery Mom on TikTok, Recovery Mom on Instagram, Recovery Mom on YouTube, I believe. Like, I don't know. I think there's an underscore in there somewhere. Just find one of them and you'll find a link tree.
We'll link it in. We'll link it in
Yeah,
the bio, so everyone can find you. Well, thank you again so much, Recovery Mom.
absolutely.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.